Hello, Facebook. Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Carly. I work with the North Coast Regional Land Trust. Thanks for joining on to our North Coast Regional Land Trust live stream. It's Thursday at 1 p.m. and I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm excited today. We're going to be talking a little bit more about invasive plants, what they are, why we should care about them, and then we're actually going to focus on some removal strategies for invasive bindweed and morning glory, which are in the same plant family. And so if we've never met before, like I just said, my name is Carly. I work with the North Coast Regional Land Trust, where I do a lot of community engagement and stewardship. And I am out here at Freshwater Farms Reserve. I'm just going to give it a little pan around. So I'm out at Freshwater Farms Reserve today, which is a North Coast Regional Land Trust. Wow, looks like we also have a nature trail, a 3/4 mile long nature trail. It looks like some folks were putting in at our boat launch here. And so out at the farm, out at the North Coast Regional Land Trust farm, Freshwater Farms Reserve has, unfortunately, like many places, quite a few invasive plants. And an invasive plant is a plant that does not naturally occur in an area. That means it did not evolve to be in this area naturally. Oftentimes invasive plants were brought in, sometimes accidentally, sometimes intentionally, and invasive plants can cause a lot of harm if not managed correctly. They can cause a lot of harm to the environment, sometimes even human and public health, or excuse me, human and animal health, I should say, like livestock. And so that's a little bit about what an invasive plant is. And just curious, if you all are tuning in, what invasive plants do you have where you are? Do you see any invasive plants out in your outdoor spaces? I know here we have a couple that I'll introduce you to in just a moment. But so why do we care about invasive plants? There are many reasons, and just two of the reasons I want to talk about are, number one, they can outcompete native plants. So the reason why invasive plants can be harmful is because that they can quickly and rapidly invade a space and then outcompete the native plants that live there, and that results in a lot of biodiversity loss. And oh, my chickens over here, not my chickens, but the chickens on the property are, I got something to say about that. So they reduce a lot of the biodiversity that you see in a region, and that's important because certain plants have evolved over time with different animals and insects in order to support the life that exists in that region. So when a native plant comes in and outcompetes when an invasive plant comes in and outcompetes a native plant, what we see is a lot of plant diversity loss, which ultimately means a lot of the native insects and plants in a region are missing out on much needed food and shelter. And on top of that, invasive plants are also harmful because they can reduce recreational opportunities in a region. And so for all my Humboldt folks who maybe have been to Freshwater Farms Reserve, because this is a public property, or it's a private property, but it's open to public access, I should say, you may have walked the nature trail, and on the sides of the trail you may have seen invasive Himalayan blackberry. And if that invasive Himalayan blackberry was not managed, it would eventually it would overtake the trail and would reduce recreational opportunities. So those are just two reasons why we are constantly working here at Freshwater Farms to ensure that we're promoting native plant species by reducing the amount of invasive plant species that exist here on the property. And if you have any other reasons why invasive plants are harmful or can be harmful, definitely leave me a comment in the comment box. I'd love to share that with others. I only named just a couple. And so what I want to transition into is talking a little bit about bindweed and Morning Glory, which is our invasive of the day. I feel like I should come up with a little catchy jingle there, like the invasive of the day. But I don't have one yet, so feel free to help me out with that. But they are both in the family, Bindweed and Morning Glory are both in the family Convolvulaceae. That's a fun one to say. But they are perennial viney plants, and they are really good at, like the name says, binding, kind of constricting around things. And so I went ahead and I found an example of bindweed that I think is just really typical of it, right? So it's this purple plant that is wrapping around this blade of grass. Oh, look, there's a little bug on there. Let's see if I can get that for you. Cute. So it's this plant right here that has the leaves on it, and Morning Glory and Bindweed typically have kind of these arrow-like leaves. Let me see if I can grab another example to show you some of the leaves a little bit better. So they typically have these arrow-like leaves, like so. They have these can you see that? There you go. They have these arrow-like leaves, and they also have these kind of funnel-shaped trumpet-like flowers. And if you are in your outdoor space and you see a plant that looks similar to that, maybe has some smaller leaves, you're in like a field or an outdoor space, you might be looking at bindweed. If you're seeing a bigger, kind of broader leaf but very similar structured plant, you might be looking at a type of Morning Glory. And I definitely encourage you to, if you think you see this plant in one of your outdoor spaces, there are some amazing online resources such as Calflora and Calscape to utilize. You can go on their websites and they will provide you a bunch of information as to what species you might be dealing with in your outdoor space. But here at Freshwater Farms, we certainly have bindweed, we certainly have Morning Glory, and I want to show you a little bit about how to remove them. And this is the part in the video where I have to tell you that unfortunately bindweed and Morning Glory are somewhat difficult to really remove from your landscape. It's going to definitely take several attempts in order for you to completely get this out of whatever space you are working in. And I don't want that to discourage you. I just want you to know that if you happen to be working on bindweed or Morning Glory in your yard, just know that if it comes back after the first time, that's totally okay, and honestly probably should be expected. You're gonna have to do this a couple times to really to get rid of Morning Glory or bindweed in your outdoor spaces, and you can do it. I know you can, and I'm here with you doing the same over and over again. So what you need when you are trying to remove bindweed or Morning Glory, some gloves are going to be really essential. You're also going to need a good trowel. And you know, if you don't have a trowel, if you don't have gloves, I really recommend at least having some gloves. You might be able to pull some of the bindweed out without a trowel, but that's definitely going to help you in the long run if you're able to get a trowel. And long sleeves are always a good recommendation. You know, not only are they going to protect you from maybe any pokey things that are on the ground, but they're also going to help you out from the sun. And if you can see, it's a sunny day here in Humboldt County, which is well received. And so I am going to go ahead, and what I'm going to do is I have a specimen of this kind of Morning Glory down here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the camera down and I'm going to try to walk you through the process here. But ultimately what you're really trying to have happen is you're trying to get as much of the root out of the ground as possible. Okay, so let's see how well I do at that. I'm going to set you all down right here, get you nice and focused on where I'm working. Looks like you should be able to see that. Oh. All right, let's see how we do here. So I'm putting my gloves on. and I have my trowel. I'm going to be putting my trowel right here. This is my morning glory vine, and I've found kind of where it enters into the ground. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to push down on my trowel, get nice and as far down as I can. I'm going to lift up, move this rock, and try to get as much of this root out as I can. I hope you guys are seeing that. So this is the root of the plant, and ooh, wow. So, you know, this root could potentially be a little bit longer in here. That was a pretty good grab for my first time through. And like I mentioned, with morning glory, you're likely, or with bindweed, you're likely gonna have to come out a couple times and go through that process, okay? But so that's removing morning glory, that's removing bindweed, and I want to show you guys, I think it's really a good example over here. It's funny to say that there's an invasive plant that's a good example, but just to really drive home how well this plant can bind on to other plants and grow. Let's see, I think I had a good example somewhere over here. I'll find it for you guys. Oh, here's the flower. Yes. So here is how to be a flower of the bindweed. I'm so glad I could find one. I was looking earlier and I could not. So there it is, and here you can see it really climbing up this grass here. But it's pretty hardy. You can even see it starting to climb around this alder tree here. So it's definitely a good plant to get rid of if you find it in your outdoor spaces, in order to really promote native plants, because that's what we're all about. It's not necessarily about the invasive plant removal as much as it is about promoting native plants in our outdoor spaces, because they are going to provide really valuable food and shelter for native insects and plants. And so that is a quick and dirty on how to remove morning glory and bindweed. And if you liked that, or if you have any questions about removal, or if you have any strategies for bindweed removal that I didn't share, definitely leave that in the comment box. And with that, maybe I should give you one more tip for how to remove morning glory or bindweed, which I did not tell you about. And another option that you have in your disposal is if it's kind of creeping and crawling on the ground, another thing you can do is put a tarp over it, or some type of geotextile plastic. And what you're really trying to do is just get all of the sunlight out of there. You don't want any sun exposure because that can help the plant grow. And you're gonna leave that plastic over it for several years, really, in order to fully get rid of that bindweed in your outdoor space. And then one thing I should tell you about when we're talking about removing it, we've removed it, and we have this remove plant. What I'm gonna do with this is I'm actually gonna stick this on a piece of tarp, like a tarp or some type of plastic, and I'll let it decompose. And once it gets nice and decomposed, I'll either take it to green waste or compost it. So those are a couple ways for what to do with this invasive plant once you have removed it. So thank you so much for tuning in. I wish you all the luck removing any of the invasive bindweed or morning glories you might see in your outdoor spaces. And I hope you tune in next Thursday. We're doing Thursdays at 1 p.m. for story time, nature story time, with Skylar, NRLT's intern. And it'll be a good one for the kiddos, so I hope they can tune in too. Okay, have a great rest of your day. See ya.